We live now? Cool. Alright. So I've never done a video like this, but I'm hoping to do more. And this morning I bought an audiobook, The 10X Rule by Grant Cardone. And I was listening to it on the way to get groceries. And afterwards I stopped to get gas and wash my car. And I was sitting there and I'm like, well, what else could I do? And I was thinking of this one YouTuber I watch, Richard Cooper, Entrepreneurs in Cars, and he talks during when he's out doing errands and stuff, and it's pretty interesting. He talks about ideas and stuff, and I was thinking about, like, well, what do I do to practice, my guitar, or just get a leg up, when I was in a car. And I was thinking about when I took lessons as a kid. When I was in the car wash, I took the back of my receipt and wrote down a list of things. Not sure you can see that. I wrote down a list of things that I did. And so, like, the first thing, and I've shared this a few times with my students, with my level of obsession that gave me a leg up with playing guitar. I was fortunate enough, my parents would often buy me a tab book, usually a Led Zeppelin or Dream Theater book, and at night when we would go back home, I would want to read it, but my dad just had this thing about he had a thing about not having a light on in the car, and so, like, I just didn't I couldn't read. So what I would do, I would sit in the back seat, and on the way back from Madison to Dodgeville, there's not that much traffic, 10 o'clock at night when it's pitch black, but, I would wait for cars to come up behind us, and then I would hold the book up like this trying to read the tablature, because I couldn't read standard notation back then, and I would just try and absorb it, and I'd be like, oh, I can't wait to get home and play this, like at 11 or midnight, and, it's just that level of obsession and dedication. And it's like, how many, what ways can you leverage your time to, again, just get a leg up on the next guitarist, or just on your time to practice, because you don't always need your instrument in front of you to practice. And even when I was taking lessons, I remember, again, it's usually a Led Zeppelin CD, probably Led Zeppelin 4. It was an hour drive to my lesson. Well, maybe more like 40. It was a 47-minute drive one way to my guitar lesson. And I would listen to sometimes the same song the whole ride there. And then when I had my lesson, we'd run around and do errands for the night, because they're just, you don't get that kind of shopping in a town of 3,000 people, as opposed to Madison. I'd listen to the same song in between errands and places we'd stop, and then all the way back I would listen to music. If I didn't have a book to look at, I would listen to the same song all the way back. So I might listen to a song anywhere, depending on, if it's Stairway to Heaven, 8 minutes long, you're not listening to that as many times, but you might listen to the same song for 2 hours in a day. And there are different levels of engagement when you listen to the same song. Sometimes it's active listening, where you're really focused, and you might listen to just the guitar part of the vocals, or it might just be passive listening, and you pick up on that too, where you space out, and then all of a sudden you hear something you didn't hear before, and then that brings you back into active listening. So there's nothing wrong with just, like, having a song on repeat and listening, super engaged, and then just kind of totally spacing out, where it almost becomes like a mantra, and then you're just, just kind of letting it flow through. That sounds a little woo-woo, but I think there's some, validity to it. Let's see what's next on my list of different ways to practice when you're in a car. Obviously this is for, students mostly that, maybe their parents are driving them to a lesson, or they're just on a road trip where, you gotta pay attention, as I'm reading my list here. Mental practice. I remember this in college. I think it was my sophomore year. It's for jazz band, and we were in a van. I remember my professor Dave Ness. He was driving, and I was sitting next to him. And this was the unit where we were doing Dixieland music, and I actually played banjo for the whole semester in jazz band. And banjo, I had one for a couple of years at that point, and I dabbled in it here and there enough to just say it's like I know a few chords and can get around. But what I did is I brought the music with because I just didn't feel that prepared. We were going to the Burlington High School for our show. I don't know how we got in there. Maybe it was one of the... I don't remember. It's not important. But anyway, we were on their way there, and it was like about an hour drive to get there. And I just stared at my music, didn't really talk to anybody for a good chunk of the ride, and I just visualized playing it, like in extreme detail. Like, where's my finger gonna move here to there? Where are all four fingers gonna move? Just trying to also just visualize playing it well. Really did a lot, because again, I wasn't feeling too comfortable about it since banjo is not my main instrument, but I can get around, and certainly back then I was even less familiar with it then. But I just tried to picture exactly how the gig would go, and it went really well. And I think it was that I can't remember now, maybe 20 to 40 minutes of just really intense concentration, focusing on how am I going to play this, and just being just really focused on where my hands were going to go for each chord, or just the arrangement, and it served well. And I've done it a few times. I played at a student's wedding last October, and I was a little nervous because the list of music was very complicated, some classical music, and catching myself saying a lot. I didn't have music then because I was just driving myself, but I just pictured myself as I was driving playing, and it was Legenda Asturias, like certain parts in the beginning, how your hands stretch, and I was just trying to visualize, okay, where are my fingers going to go, and how much pressure, just you really try and feel how much pressure it's going to take, because some of the bar chords in the beginning of that piece are really tough. So that was another instance where practicing and the mental visualization really helped out. Let's see, rhythm practice. Yeah, this was really big for me. This is kind of a two-parter. After I graduated, I moved in with my sister and her roommate to Lake Zurich, and I started teaching. I had one student at the time, and then my next job was the back room. They shunned me to the back room at the Lake Zurich Target, and it was a half hour. Well, after a while, I moved out, and then I had a half-hour drive just to get to Target. And then I would listen to, at the time I was listening to a lot of Yes and early Genesis. And I would listen to it because that's a lot of progressive rock, there's a lot of time signature changes, tempo changes, this and that. And I remember being in aural skills freshman and sophomore year, and that was always my hardest class. It did not come naturally to me. I just didn't understand like the counting of it, but I also didn't want to be, after I graduated, I was like, I don't want that to be, something I fall down on. So I would listen to the songs, again, sometimes the same song, or, it sometimes is a lot better to just have a different song going over and over. And I would try and figure out the rhythmic dictation where I'm counting, 1-ian and 2-ian, and find out exactly where. And I would also practice, tapping my foot and saying the rhythms out loud to try and really solidify. At the time, even just doing eighth notes was a challenge that didn't come naturally right away. And especially syncopation and tied notes. And then when I got kind of competent at that, then it was 16th notes, and then trying to figure out, okay, what rhythm is the drummer playing? Bill Bruford or something. And I could tell it was like 16th notes on the hi-hat and whatnot. And I wasn't always just focused on the guitar, and that takes practice, just to not listen to your own instrument and focus in on that. And when I would make mistakes, it's like, okay, what mistake did I just make? And does that rhythm that I made a mistake, does it fit over the song? So, with 16th notes, it might have been 1 and a 2 and a 3, and I, went 1E, a 2E, a 3E, a 4E, and that helped develop kind of like that internal clock to really feel those rhythms and subdivisions. So, yeah. And then, being on the highway like I am right now, like that created a really good time where I could just set the cruise control, not be in a hurry, and, tap my foot on the gas pedal, not the brakes. That might piss off the people behind me. But, just trying to find those different places where you can practice your instrument with not having it around. It gets a little boring driving, I think. I don't enjoy driving at all. So that was the way I got to practice guitar while being in the car. So